Okay, thank you for stopping by my brand new channel. Really appreciate it. This channel is going to be dedicated to my other passion besides guitar playing and shredding, which is the outdoors, particularly hunting, fishing, mostly hunting, because that's sort of the fever I got going on right now. I've been hunting all my life. I kind of walked away from it for a little while, kind of lost interest, but this past deer season, I really got the buck fever hard. I've kind of been a meat hunter since I've gotten older and got more mature, but here recently I just really got the buck fever again. And I started doing something I really never done before, which was actually delving into researching and learning about deer habitat management. I'm blessed for having grown up on lots of land, having inherited lots of land, and that's what we're looking at right now. This is an aerial view of a portion of my property. And before I get into my video, I just want to say that the things I'm going to talk about here are not my original ideas. I am very much a noob. I'm very much learning a lot of this stuff, but I have put in a lot of hours and time just binging content, watching stuff, reading articles, just whatever I can get my hands on, whatever I can get my eyes on. And I think at this point I've got a pretty decent baseline to start documenting my journey from square one or close to square one. It's not even the end of the 2021-2022 deer season. We still have to this weekend, but already I've been out scouting. I've been not worrying about disturbing the deer. I've pretty much made the deer nocturnal on my property at this point. I thought I ran them completely off, but I was just coming home from the dollar store and I saw a bunch of them out in the field. It's raining, so I haven't driven them off the property. It's probably a lot of the does are still around and they're nocturnal. But anyway, what I'm about to talk about, there's a lot of things I'm going to say, a lot of concepts I'm going to use. Just want to say I can't take credit for them. I will try to cite the individuals or the content creators that I heard these from as much as I can as I go. But what I'm trying to do here is kind of a number of things. Number one, if you're just getting into this, if you're someone who has property and you're interested in learning how to attract deer to your property, and specifically how to attract mature bucks to your property, which that's kind of two different things. Attracting deer is one thing. That's probably a little bit easier. Most people have deer on their property. But attracting and holding big bucks on your property is a completely different thing, and it requires understanding the specifics about what they're looking for and how to make your property the one that they choose to stay on. But as I was saying, this video is for basically once you get started as a noob looking into a lot of this stuff, it's very overwhelming. There's thousands of videos. Some of these content creators, all this information's out there. It's out there for free. It's out there for you to learn. But it's really, it's a lot to take in, and it's a lot of content to sort of get to where I'm at, which is not very far along. Like, I'm still very much a noob, but to get even just to where I'm at was a lot of reading and a lot of watching content and just... I'm trying to sort of make it a little bit more concise so that maybe after you watch this video, if you're new to this, you might have a kind of a baseline of understanding to go by. And the other portion of this video is I want to basically, I'm trying to learn here. And I'm going to be asking my questions. So if any of you experts, any of you really well-learned and educated guys out there who know what they're talking about want to chime in, I'm partially making this video to sort of discuss my own dilemmas and my own questions and inquiries. So I'm learning as I go. So I'm sort of flipping the paradigm on its head. I'm not learning by teaching. I'm kind of teaching by learning in a way. So anyway, this is an aerial view of my property. In particular, this is an area where I intend to put a food plot. Now, when it comes to deer, deer season is centered around the rut. And if you don't know what that is the deer's mating season. And during the rut, bucks put themselves through a lot of crapola. The bucks go through a lot, and they exert lots of energy. Sometimes they die. I mean, they almost kill themselves in the rut, chasing does, fighting each other. Inside of the forest, there's a lot of their food sources have died. They don't get the nutrition that they need inside the forest, really. So they're looking to deer will structure their lives in relation to a main food source. And for us as hunters, during hunting season, which happens during the winter, that's going to be out in a field somewhere. It's going to or most of the time, it's usually going to be out in the open where there is an abundance of good quality food supply, nutritious food that they're going to eat. Inside the woods, you've kind of got what they call browse food, which is like roughage, twigs, acorns, briars, just, hard to digest food that is, they can feed on it, but eventually they feed 5 times a day in a 24-hour period. They're going to want to get out in that field and eat off of that main nutritious feeding, because especially the bucks require it. Now, when it comes to food, the way deer live and the way they sort of live their daily lives is wherever the food is, you're going to have like a sort of you're going to have kind of a structure of bedding areas and where the deer stay. Now, as far as bucks are concerned, the mature bucks, which is what we're hunting for, these old bucks, they kind of get driven out of the herd by does, from what I understand. Does will bed as close to a food source as they can. They'll bed like right around the food source. If there's a good bedding area with good coverage, they will bed down near the food source, I think within like 50 to 100 yards of a food source. And so wherever they're at, basically they're going to create a doe herd around the food source, does and fawns, and they're kind of going to just push the bucks out. And the bucks, the older they get, they become these very solitary animals. They prefer to live away from where all the does are. All the does are down here. They've got their doe herd around the food plot. The bucks are going to be up here on the ridge. They're going to be up here bedding down next to trees. They're going to be up here in the thickets. And the mature bucks are going to be in one of 3 places. They're either going to be in their bedding area, which is where they spend most of their life, or they're going to be in the food area, or they're going to be in some staging area in between bedding and food. And now that we know that, we can now, with a more informed approach, we can go about designing our food plot. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm actually going to take a screenshot of this little area right here so I can draw on it. Let's bring this up. Okay, let's just... Okay, here we go. I think we can just do it like this. So, any good hunting property is going to start with food. It starts with your food source. If you don't have the food, the deer are not going to come onto your property. They're looking for food. But they're also looking for something that is equally, maybe even like what is the word? Inextricably, or you can't have one without the other. You can't have shelter or the food without the cover. So if you can plant the best food source in the whole county, you can have the most lush, healthy, beautiful food plot in the whole county, but if it's not covered up, if it's not hidden, if it doesn't have a good layer of screening around it, and by screening I mean some kind of tall grass, some kind of tall layer of grass or trees or whatever to screen it off to where the deer feel secure going into that feeding area, to where they don't feel pressured, they don't feel pursued, they feel like they're hidden and it's a safe place for them to be. If they don't have both the food and that screening, they're going to go somewhere else. They're going to go on somebody else's property. They're going to go find that somewhere else, and that's where they're going to establish their home range. So deer live in relation to the food source, to a main food source. So as I said before, you're going to have does who are going to stay closest to the food source. They're kind of going to form a doe herd. Does and fawns, maybe some young bucks. But your big mature bucks are not going to hang around the does. They want no part of that. They're going to be up here. So my food plot, if we're looking at this on the map, and I'm going to select green here. I'm going to do this in different. Let's make this a little, let's make this a little fatter here. So we've got, I'm going to come in a little ways. I'm going to give myself some room. So you see this, so this is an airstrip right here. This is where my mouse is. This is a grass airstrip. There's a little road that goes along the airstrip. That road goes across that gully and it turns down there. This is a creek right here, you can see. I'm actually going to highlight that creek really quick just so you see. I'm going to highlight it in blue. So you got this creek flowing. Let me screw that up a little bit. Flowing into the lake right here. Okay. Now, as for my food plot, this is where I'm going to establish my food. Right here in this field. About like this. And it's going to keep going. It's going to kind of bottleneck, and then it's going to come out here. And I don't know what I'm going to plant yet, but okay. Now, I don't know if I can, let's see, make it real big so I can color this in really good. Sorry, not trying to be like art class on you now, but I kind of just want to make it a good visual representation. So I am going to color all this in. But, let's see, just a second. I have to do this. I'm OCD as all get out. Just a little more here. All right, there, good enough. Boy, am I autistic. Okay. So there's a food plot. And around, so whatever that is, I don't know what that's going to be, but let's say this right here, this dark green represents the layer of screening that I'm going to put around it, which is probably going to be Egyptian wheat. So Egyptian wheat is going to be this tall grass, this annual grass. It grows about 10 to 12 feet high. It doesn't, the deer do not eat it. You don't want your screening, whatever you're using for your screening, your cover around your food plot, you do not want that to be something that the deer eat, because it's not going to screen you. The deer are going to be in it, eating it. You want it to be a wall in between. This food source, once you plant it, once you have your screening, once everything's done, and once it's deer season, you do not go in this. This becomes a deer sanctuary. You never go through this food plot unless you've killed a deer and it's laying in the food plot and you got to go in there to retrieve it. Otherwise, this is a deer sanctuary. So there's three things that the deer need. really. They need food first. You don't have the food, you don't bring the deer onto your property. The food needs to be covered. It needs to be screened, hidden. They need to feel like there's nothing there to bother them. That's what they're looking for. And they need, going along with the cover, sort of the same idea, is they need you to leave them alone. Don't go in there. Don't make any commotion. Don't drive pickup trucks around the area. Leave that part of your property untouched once it's deer season. It doesn't matter the rest of the season, because the deer you have on your property in the off season during the summer, that's not going to tell you anything about what's going to happen in deer season, because everything changes when the rut happens. The deer herds are basically created during the deer season, during the fall, because that's when they're looking for food sources. The food sources are abundant during the summertime. Summertime, they don't have to seek these food plots, these food sources, these ag fields, these open fields to get their food. So if you just plant the food and you don't plant cover and you don't keep it secluded, the deer are still going to visit your food plot, but they're just going to visit it at nighttime. So you've done yourself no good by just planting the food, because all you've done is attract a nocturnal deer herd. Deer are going to either find a food source that they feel safe going in during the day, or they're going to be nocturnal and they're going to go to some food source during the night. Either way, they're going to get their food. What you want to do is establish a food source that the deer feel safe coming in during the daytime. Okay, so let's draw our Egyptian wheat. So Egyptian wheat is a short-term solution for screening. Now, I don't know exactly if I'm going to screen it all the way around like this. I might, once it gets closer to time, once summertime rolls around, I'm actually out there on the tractor working. I'm sure that I'm going to maybe do it a little bit different, because, if you look at this, there's no corridor for entrance, and I'm going to have to create, entry corridors here for the deer to get in there. Let's just say right there and, I don't know, right here, because there's a little, valley there. Oops. That ain't right. Oh, forget it. Okay, so there's our Egyptian wheat. Now, also what I want to plant is some switchgrass, because switchgrass is not an annual. It's something you plant and you let it grow for a long time, and it's a long-term grass. So let's say this is our switchgrass. So as we're using Egyptian wheat for our short-term, because it grows quick. You can have it up in one summer really quick, and and you can mow it down and it doesn't grow back. While we're using Egyptian wheat as our screen, we're going to also be growing switchgrass. So we're going to plant that as well. We're going to let it grow, but in the meantime, we've got our Egyptian wheat thing going on. So we're going to have this year, and in the years to come, we're going to have this food plot as a very closed-off, screened food source, right? Nobody can see inside it. The deer can't see out. The deer feel safe going in here. They're not going to be pursued. They're not going to feel threatened. Okay. So by doing this, we have brought deer here. They know this is a safe place for them to go and eat. Now, the next thing we got to worry about, and I kind of screwed up here because I didn't leave myself enough room. It's kind of hard to draw this, but just imagine there's a tree line. These trees are kind of sticking over the tree line that's on the ground here. But just imagine that this is maybe a good 20 yards off of the tree line, 20 or 30 yards, and we're going to give ourselves 20 to 30 yards of area to make doe bedding. So we've got the food, we've got the cover. Now, as I explained before, the does are going to bed as close to the food source as they can get. If you don't give them bedding here, if you don't plant grass, if you don't let the hay grow up so that they have a place to bed near the food source, they're going to move back as far as they need to move back into the trees or into whatever to find bedding. So the further back they have to move to find bedding, that is going to determine how far back these big bucks are going to move. So you want to give them bedding as close as you can to the food source, around the food source, so that you've controlled the food, you've got it secluded, you've controlled the cover, you've controlled the dough bedding. Now you have given yourself the opportunity to control where the bucks are bedding. And I'll show you ideas on how you can do that. And I'm also soliciting information. So if any experts are listening to this and you hear some big no-nos that I'm making, comment. I'm going to put my email in the description. You can email me about it and clear that up. Straighten me out because I don't want to be wrong. And I'm going to ask my questions at the end because I have some dilemmas of my own and some questions of my own. So part of this is for me. So let's say right within here, we've got this tree line, we've got this hill. I think what I'm going to do is not plant anything. I'm just going to let this grass grow up. Because I've got hay. This is a hay field. I cut the hay every year, and it's a big business for me. And it grows. I mean, you can tell right now, even with me having never done any white-tailed deer habitat management on the property before, you can tell. It would go kind of like that there. You can tell where the doe's bed. You can see on the edge of these hay fields, anywhere there's even if the hay has been cut, if there's a good 20 yards of hay on the edge of a tree line, off the side of a tree line here where it's still grown up, you'll see doe bedding in there. You'll see where they're bedding down. So I know they do use it for bedding. And if any experts are watching this and you have a good recommendation for what makes good doe bedding, what I can plant, please let me know. Chime in with that. But so basically right there would be my doe bedding, right? So I've controlled the food. I've controlled the coverage on the food plot. I've controlled the doe bedding. I've eliminated other areas where they may potentially bed. I want to influence where they stay. I give them every reason to want to stay here, right? Okay. Now, up here on the hill, this is where your bucks are roaming. This is where your big bucks are, because they want to stay just far enough away from where the does are, where they're not having to deal with the drama of the does and the fawns, right? But they don't, if this food source is a safe place for them to eat and it's reliable, they don't want to be too far away from it. It's not like some big bucks, they will walk a long way to get to their food source because the food sources close to where their bedding is just not secure for them. They may find a secure bedding area on one property and a secure feeding area on another property. One property may have good secure bedding, but it may not have good secure feeding. And so they'll go where they have to find that secure feeding. So you're giving them both here. You're giving the secure feeding and you can give them the secure bedding. Now here's where my dilemma comes in. And by the way, before I get started on that, what creates good buck bedding? What would influence them to bed here? There's a number of things you can do. And by the way, a lot of what I'm talking about here, I'm getting from two different guys. I'm kind of summarizing their content, which they sort of spread out over hundreds and thousands of videos. But that's Jeff Sturgis at Whitetail Habitat Solutions. He's one of, if you search anything about managing deer herds or deer habitat management, he's one the top results you're going to see. The other one, I think, what is his name? I think it's Whitetail Obsession Outdoors. I can't remember that guy's name, but he's really good too. So I can't take credit for what I'm saying. I'm just kind of summarizing what they would tell you, or something similar to what they would tell you. But one thing you can do to influence buck bedding is hinge cutting trees. When you hinge cut a tree, you don't cut all the way through the tree. You cut about 70%. You let it fall down. It leaves part of the tree attached. The tree still falls down. And what I think that does is two different things. It creates buck bedding because it creates horizontal cover. They can bed down next to it. It also gives them daytime browse food because they can eat off of the top of that tree that's falling, and they can eat like the roughage and the stems that are off to the side of it. It gives them browse food in their bedding area. And it also encourages hardwood regeneration because you've removed that canopy in that one area that big mature hardwood tree was creating. That sunlight hits the forest floor. It creates regeneration, which means new growth of new trees. But you can kind of get carried away with that, and that's what I'm going to get into here. So about 5 or 6 years ago, my dad on this very hill right here did a logging job, and he cleared out a lot of it. It's not clean cut, but it is a lot more thinned out. And let me tell you, there used to be trails up on this hill. This kind of used to be my stomping ground when I was a kid, and I loved it. And it was beautiful, but it is not beautiful now. It looks like a war zone now. There's logging debris everywhere, treetops, piles of tree debris from the logging site. It's all grown up in thickets and briars. It's just thick and tall, and just it's a mess. The woods are regenerating themselves, which is bad for like us as people because it just looks bad and it's not pleasant to be in. It used to be this beautiful, like, clear forest floor that you could walk through. It was kind of picturesque, and these big mature hardwood trees. Now it's a bunch of debris piled up. It's a bunch of briars and thickets. But from what I understand, that is really good habitat for bucks. Bucks like to be in those thickets. They like to feed off of those briars, off of that roughage. It's good browse food for them. And so this is kind of a good thing, but it's also part of my dilemma because sort of the last component of this when you're hunting deer is stand placement and being able to access your hunting area, being able to access it without spooking the deer. The problem is everywhere you look on this ridge, like here's a bank of a ridge, and this ridge is pretty steep. You can't really tell on this map, but everywhere you look on this side, I think even on this side, especially up here, it's been logged. So because it's been logged, there's not really much I can do to do any more buck bed creation. I can't really influence any more bedding up there. So in other words, if I'm not influencing the bedding, if this was like an untouched forest and I went out here and I hinge cut a bunch of trees and I planted some conifers and I planted some red cedars and whatnot, I would be basically creating the bedding area, so I would know where the bedding area is. But in this scenario where it's all been logged, this entire hill is open game for bucks to bed on. So I have no idea where to create my trail. Or where to put my stand. I could be walking through their bedding area or their staging area or whatever at any point on this hill. So that's a big dilemma for me. How do you rectify that? Would it be a matter of like removing some of it instead of creating buck bedding? Maybe I need to be removing buck bedding and like confining it to a particular location. Maybe that's what I need to be doing. You guys can let me know. I'm not exactly sure. Other than that, I'm not sure. I would say you're trying to funnel them into an area that you know where they are. You know they're bedding here, they're feeding here. You're not disturbing this area. You're not walking through this area to get to your stand. You're not disturbing it, and so it leaves them to be safe and alone. So they think. So is that what you would do? Would you try to go through here and cut out some of these briars, maybe on this side of the hill, and remove some of that debris and clean it up over here to where there's not good bedding opportunity over here, and like leave all the good bedding over here? Excuse me. Maybe you guys can give me some good advice on that. But that's basically it in a nutshell. And there's one more concept that I wanted to talk about, and this one I have to credit to Jeff Sturgis from Whitetail Habitat Solutions. When he talks about depth of coverage, and I'm gonna draw this. Let's see. So he talks about having a parcel of land, say it's 20 acres, because this illustrates sort of the behavior of deer. Wait, before I do this, I just remembered. So basically what we're doing here is we're not just creating food. If you just put out food, once again, you're just going to create a plot where deer are going to come in at night, and there's no reason for them to stay on your property, because they don't have cover, and it's any food plot is basically safe at nighttime. You're just creating like a nocturnal feeding area for them. Whereas if you give them the cover and you control the doe bedding around the food plot, and you give them a good habitat to bed in, you're not only attracting them to your property, you're holding them on your property. You want them not just to come on your property to feed, you want them to live on your property. You want them to choose. So you want to give them the property that they want to live on. Your property is going to be the quiet one. It's going to be the one where no vehicles drive by. It's going to be the one where they don't see people walking around. They don't hear hunters in the woods spooking them. There's nobody walking through their feeding area. Their feeding area is hidden. It's got this wall of 10, 12, 13-foot Egyptian wheat around it, or switchgrass, or whatever you've got around it. It's got this great bedding area. It's got everything they need to stay there. It's not just food. It's not just about food, although food is the starting point. If you don't have the food, you got to start with the food, because they are going to live their life in relation to a food source, to a main food source. You just got to give them. It's like, you wouldn't live in a house if it just had a kitchen and it just had a living room, but it didn't have a roof over it, and it didn't have bedrooms, and it didn't have a bathroom. You wouldn't live in that house. You might go in there and sit down and eat a lunch, but you wouldn't live there. You'd go find somewhere else to live, right? It's the same concept. This is having a food plot is like just having a dining room. You get the point. Okay. So you got your 20-acre property, and this is Jeff Sturgis talks about this concept called depth of cover. So let's say your property is kind of like this, just, it's as wide as it is long. It doesn't really matter. Let's say you want to plant a 5-acre food plot, and you plant it right in the middle. Now, planting it right in the middle, this demonstrates the idea of depth of coverage, because let's say this is an open field. You've got hills that surround this, but they go off your property. Well, you plant that food plot in the middle, you can give it, the good cover area around it where it's covered so the deer feel safe going there, and maybe you've got the doe bedding around it. But by the time you've got everything, even though you're establishing doe bedding close to the food source, you're running out of room. Your depth of coverage is not good enough in any direction for there to be bucks staying on your property. And, you want the bucks to stay on your property because it's not in the food source that you get the opportunity to shoot these deer, because they're even on this scenario that I laid out here where it's a secure food source, they may not go feed out in this food source until nighttime. They may still be nocturnal going in here, but they're living on your property. So because they're living on and bedding on your property, they're going to be in their bedding area. They don't just bed down all the time in their bedding area. They're not always just laying down in their beds. They get up and move, but it's usually within their bedding area or some staging area. And then when it's safe, whether that's at nighttime or whether it's just before nighttime or whatever, whenever they feel safe going out, they'll exit these woods and they'll go into this food plot area. So keeping them, giving them the bedding and having them live on your property as opposed to just coming on your property to eat is the key, because that is where you get the opportunity to shoot these deer, these big giant bucks during the day, is in their bedding region, because that's where they're going to be up and at 'em and roaming. They're going to be feeding off of browse and etc. Okay. So if you planted this food plot here in the middle of your property, your depth of cover is not enough. You don't have enough distance until it runs off of your property to give yourself an opportunity to create bedding or bedding opportunities for bucks. Whereas if you were to plant your food plots like something like this 5-acre food plot, you got the cover around it. You got the doe bedding, right? Now you've got all of this here to influence, which could be buck bedding. And there are techniques. I don't necessarily know them all. I'm still learning that. I know hinge cutting is one technique, but I do know that you can now, you may not have it this direction. You may not have it in this direction. You may not have it in this direction because this is the edge of your property, but you do have it in this direction. And you can go up here and you can make this one area the best place in the entire neighborhood for bucks to stay. And anyway, that is that. I just wanted to show that. That's Jeff Sturgis, once again, Whitetail Habitat Solutions. I didn't come up with that. I got it from him. Go check him out if you want to. Don't save. Anyway, that's it. Once again, my big question, just to wrap up this video, I hope it hasn't been too dang long. The logging. The logging, basically making it so there's not much I can do to influence any more buck bedding. Should I go through here and try to eliminate areas where they can bed? Like try to knock out, like eliminate an options over here and try to leave only options on this part? Or what should I do? Because the further back you get, and let's go back to the map, I guess, here. The further back you get here, it hasn't really been logged, actually. And right up here above the lake here, you can see that lake, or it's actually a pond, but we call it the lake. This is shaped like a guitar. My dad dug this out years ago. You got this creek, which always has water in it. It's got a waterfall right here. It gets fed by a spring up here somewhere. This hill back here is not logged. It's still got nice mature hardwood on it. And I could do some hinge cuts up here. And, the food plot's going to wind up through here. So there's probably up in here some good opportunity for buck bedding. But once again, here's where I live. This is my house. This is the old trail I used to enter by. And this has all been logged too up in here. All up here. All around here. How do you go about creating good access and stand placement in that scenario? I'm open for any ideas. Anyway, that's going to be it. I appreciate you checking out the video. Please like and subscribe to this channel. This is the first installment in my journey towards deer habitat management. We're starting it now. It's not even the end of the 2021-2022 deer season. We're going to keep going. I'm going to post all my updates when I start working on building my food plot and my screening and everything else. It's going to be epic. It's going to be a learning experience. I'm hoping to learn a ton along the way, and hopefully this will wrap up next season when I get a big giant buck. So thank you, and I hope you follow me on this journey. We'll see you later.